So third question here. Language learning is a lot about memorization. Of course, we have to learn new words, new phrases, and idioms, and so forth. Um, you know, a language like Japanese, for example, the words are going to be very different from, English or other Romance languages. How do you do it? How do you memorize new words and phrases? Do you have any techniques? Do you learn in chunks, or do you learn like lists of words? How do you do it?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Now, a lot of people focus on and they talk about acquiring words, and that's important because words are the bricks of that make out the wall, so to say, the language
Hmm.
wall. Um, I have various techniques for that, and it really depends on the phase I am in. For example, when I'm a beginner, when I start learning a language, I do something. When I use this back and forth translation. When I'm in an intermediate phase, I do something else, and when I'm advanced, I do something different. So basically, to make a long story short, I use this bilingual text and use this back and forth translation to learn words in chunks. I believe, and this goes for pronunciation, intonation, and grammar words, that we learn languages in chunks. That means that, for example, kids learn not only the words, but they learn how to pronounce a whole sentence by hearing chunks of the language. Uh, the main difference when people say that adults learn differently, they learn differently because they're also taught to learn differently. For example, you go to language school and you have the teacher who shows you how do you say hand, and everybody repeats hand. So they teach you words in isolation.
Right.
But the truth is that, for example, the phonetic configuration of a word changes according to its position in a sentence. So it's not only a matter of pronunciation, so you learn to pronounce single words, but then you don't know how to put them together, or
Hmm.
your prosody is wrong. But
Especially in
it's also a
Chinese, for
matter of
example.
learning in chunks and in context. So what I do is I always use bilingual. I believe that your L1 is a valuable tool to learn another language, but because you can always use it as a crutch to understand what you're learning, what is unknown to you. But you learn in chunks. I believe that a language is a net. So every time uh, I strongly suggest you not concentrate, focus on single words, but you always have to find these words in context. That means that you learn words from sentences. And I believe that this is extremely important. So what I do when I use this back and forth translation, I always translate, I always focus on messages that are contained in sentences. And I learn words in as a consequence of that. So this is at the beginning when you don't know pretty much anything of the language. I use this back and forth translation. It helps me a lot because it helps me notice my mistakes when I translate back, but it also makes me remember words because I want to convey a message. I read a text, I find the content interesting. If I find it interesting, a dialogue naturally, and when I have already translated into my native tongue and I try to translate it back a few days later, I want to convey a message. So my desire to say again what I have heard in a sentence, in context, helps me helps enormously, and helps me. The words just stick as a consequence of wanting to wanting to say something to transmit a message, and that is extremely important because it's a brain-friendly way of learning a language. You learn it because it's a tool. You want to talk, even if you don't want to talk directly and want to talk to somebody, you're still trying to convey a message. And learning is a consequence of that. While people want to learn deliberately and they try to learn words, they have a list of words and they repeat words over and over. As I said before, it's not only what you do, but also the time schedule. So if you do it in a certain way and you respect a certain time schedule, according to this forgetting curve, because we forget things pretty quickly, if you can revise it in a certain way and you always keep in mind that you want to convey a message, um, learning and memorizing words will be a consequence of that action, and they will stick for good in your long-term memory instead of trying to deliberately learn words in isolation or even words in context. That's the technique I've applied, and that's a principle I abide by because even if techniques vary according to the phase I am in. I always respect this principle, to learn words in context and to choose something interesting that I want to talk about later by using the words that I'm learning.
So you found that basically writing, the actual writing process where you're actually translating the sentences and everything, you found that this really helps in memorizing because you both have the context, the emotions, and you're getting even physically involved in writing the text. So you found that this helps a lot.
It helps a lot. You don't necessarily have to when you translate back. I've never talked about this. I believe you don't necessarily have to translate it by writing it. You can also translate it by just saying it out loud orally. But the difference is that if you write it, you will see. You will learn how to write appropriately, and you will create a bond between the written word and the sounds, which is very important. That's the reason why every time I speak, I see subtitles in my mind. So every time I speak, even English, to guide my pronunciation, because my brain creates a bond between the sound and the written words, the written word. Now, somebody might say that we learn languages, like as kids, we hear the language first, and then we learn how to write. But since we are adults and we can use our eyes and ears, so we can read something, we can take advantage of what we have. And I believe that if a language has a script, like a lot of languages, most of the languages I've been, well, actually all the languages that I've learned so far, you can use texts, so you can read a text while you listen to it to create this bond, which is very powerful.
Very interesting. So it's a bit like the website link.com, where you have the audio and also the text at the same time, or audiobooks that you can download or buy, on websites.
Yeah,
that's something you would recommend.
That's the reason why I find websites like Link very, very important, because they provide interesting content, especially for intermediate learners, especially in that phase where you can read and listen. A lot of people find it difficult to understand. For example, some people ask me, how can you understand the radio? The fact is that written words, when people speak, they aggregate, they put words together, because the number of sounds that come out from your mouth are different from the number of written words. When we say, I'm happy and I want to go there, you say, I'm happy, just one sound, and I want to go there. So that makes it difficult for a person who's not used to hearing that language. It's just jumble mumble. You cannot understand, you cannot make out the single sounds. And some people might say, well, if you read, that doesn't help, it might confuse you. But if you find a way to decipher text phonetically, to combine texts with listening, and you do it for a certain amount of time, your brain will get accustomed to the sounds, and then you will be autonomous. So you will understand even more complicated content, like people talking on the radio or doing some other, on television. And that's what I've been doing. Phase 1, phase 2, there are actually phases of training phases. And then once you went to a certain stage, a threshold, you understand almost everything, and you become an advanced speaker of a given language.
Great. Okay, so lots of great tips so far. Wow. No, I think the most interesting thing I found is when you're telling me that when you speak, you see subtitles. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how they call it, but that's what I see in every language. So even in Chinese, I see pinyin. I don't see characters. Sometimes I see characters as well, but mostly I believe that this is a consequence of what I do. When people say, for example, I am more like a visual learner, or I think we're all of these things, and in the sense that we have ears, a mouth, etc. So we have to try to use what we have. I talked to some people who told me, well, I see no subtitles. They said, I don't see any subtitles. I said, well, it probably depends on the person. But I believe that if you have something you can see, it helps you, because you not only see that thing, you hear it. So you can attack that thing from different perspectives. And it helps incredibly to boost your capacity of retaining information.
And you know, I think my next question is a bit related to all what we've been talking here. It's the issue of, you know, just motivation. Basically, you just keep the work going and you just don't give up. And you know, I've been looking at a lot of polyglots on YouTube, like Moses and you know, Steve Kaufman and Glossica and all these polyglots who've just like you have been learning so many languages for so long, and they just never give up. You know, so how do you do it? How do you just keep going? How do you keep your motivation going?
Well, first of all, you have to consider that if we're talking about very passionate language learners, languages, as my friend Richard said, is like he considers himself some kind of languageaholic.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's kind of it's a little bit like drugs, in the sense that once you get going, you never have enough. You can never have enough. And that's because you see that it really changes your life completely. You can talk to so many people, understand different worlds and different perspectives, and that pushes you forward. So I'm talking about maybe exceptions, in the sense that the average learner does it probably for different reasons. We do it out of sheer passion. That means once you get going, you keep going. So as far as I'm concerned, I can talk to you about my personal experience. I've been learning languages for 20 years, and I see that speaking languages is changing the way I live and the way I see the world. And that's all. And there's no, you know, you talk about pros and cons of when you do something, you do it too much, but I see no cons. I see just pros. I see
no
just
overdose
advantages.
of language learning, you know.
Exactly. So, and then it gets easier. So in this case, I'm talking about, you know, special cases, in the sense that these people are extremely passionate about what they're doing. But I also believe that there's a lot of people who do it for different reasons. For example, if they have to work, they have to go live in I don't know, in a foreign country, or they have to learn a language because they have to for some reason, for work or for other reasons, then it's a little bit different. They perceive it almost as a chore. So the first thing that you have to do is, even if you have to do something, try to make it, you know, pleasant, because language learning, it can really change your life. So it's an ability that you acquire. And the other thing is that you have to find a way to, you know, at the beginning, it might be a little bit different. It might be a little bit difficult to choose, to select, for example, language series you like. As I said, the problem is that they impose content. Sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't. But the fact that you're like setting foot on an unknown ground, and you're discovering something else, should, you know, make you happy. And I believe that the problem is that, as far as motivation is concerned, is that you have to try to study, as I said, a little bit every day, and then you have to try that, you know, not to burn out. That's very different. And then you have to constantly remind yourself of the amazing things that can happen to you once you speak a language. You can, like, fantasize a little bit. Imagine yourself talking to a cute girl, or having conversations and about interesting conversations about a certain culture, and about getting to know amazing people, being able to enjoy a country from a different perspective. Because I think, and I saw it firsthand, that when you go to a country and you speak language, things warm up. You know, even people warm up pretty quickly. The example. A glaring example of this is, like, in France. There's a lot of Americans, a lot of foreigners, even Italians, who consider French a little bit, you know, snobbish, a little bit froid. But the thing is that living in France, I was treated exactly like a Frenchman, and people talking, and they were very gentle, even more gentle than Italians were considered warmer. So, and I enjoyed literature, philosophy. Very interesting conversation that changed everything. So you have to imagine yourself doing and experiencing all those things while you learn. Another very important thing is that our brain works when you do something pleasant, then you feel a sense of satisfaction after that. For example, after 30 minutes, you feel you've done something interesting and useful in your life, and that sense of satisfaction, when it arises, it helps you going. It means, okay, I've done this today, I'm gonna do it tomorrow. That's like running. running. I love running, for example, and that is exactly the same thing. When you go running, after you've run, you feel great, and you want to do it again. At the beginning, you know, when you start jogging, you've never done it before, it might be a little bit, oh my God, you know, after 30 minutes, because you're not used to it. But once you get going, things start changing, and you want to do it every single day. So it's not about, it's about, you know, jogging and language learning, they have a lot of things in common. When you do something, so basically remind yourself of how many things language learning can bring about, and you have to feel, I'm pretty sure that you will feel it, a sense of satisfaction once you've done something interesting for you, your life, and the people who surround you.
Or the first, you know, foreigner you approach in the language you're learning, you know, your first conversation. These are moments of extreme joy and satisfaction, that's for sure. So yeah, maybe visualizing maybe yourself in these moments and really maybe, you know,
yes,
motivating yourself to that.